In the state of Zacatecas, the police dress like this, not against the sun or COVID, but because if they're identified, they risk being killed. More have died here than anywhere else in Mexico so far this year.
A deadly shootout between federal police and a group of unidentified gunmen has left 10 federal officers dead and others wounded. It's another sign of the drug-related violence that is plaguing this region in the western part of the country. The incident took place near a vocational school as the officers were returning from patrol.
First things first, man, when you are a police officer in Mexico, you got a big target on your chest.
The infamous cartels of Mexico aren't limited to just smuggling narcotics nowadays. Their brutalities have crossed all limits in the last few decades. On top of attacking rival cartels, they're now targeting locals, abducting tourists, and fighting law enforcement officials whenever they feel threatened by them. Unlike the cartels, law enforcement agencies usually have limited resources and only a handful of well-trained officers, and losing them by the dozens has become a threat. With the ongoing riot between cartels, law enforcement agencies are only witnessing the rise in the death toll, and the number of officers losing their precious lives is growing every day. So how do the cartel members attack the officers? And how do the officers protect themselves in such dangerous moments? Let's find out their tactics from this viral security camera footage, along with the valuable analysis of the footage from an expert. The viral security footage shows the parking lot of a taco shop. The on-duty officers are in a pickup truck. They've just eaten and are backing out from their parking space. There's an SUV on the right which belongs to the cartel. A couple of members suddenly jump out of the car and approach the truck. The 3 cartel members are armed, and they take aim at the vehicle backing away. One cartel member fires at the pickup truck. The bullet hits the windshield. The other 2 members run to their right and take position. An officer jumps out of his seat and rolls onto the ground to save himself. The other officer also comes out the same door. Both officers scramble away. The first one hides behind the engine block of the pickup truck. The other officer runs and hides behind another car in the same lot. The cartel members are still positioned on the other side of the pickup truck, their weapons pointed at the officers. The 3 cartel members can be seen distancing themselves from the pickup and taking better positions. The white SUV disappears from the scene. This gives the first officer a chance to rise up from his crouching position and go back to his car seat. He picks up his rifle and takes aim at the cartel members, who are running to and fro on the street as their car reverses and gets ready to flee the scene. The cartel members try to get into their SUV, but it quickly drives off without them, as one of the officers, who is clearly wounded, manages to collect his rifle and fires at the retreating car. The same footage shows the scenario a little better when viewed from another angle. As the officer picks up his weapon, the cartel members begin to run across the street to get back to their vehicle. The SUV comes rushing back to collect the members, but as the officer fires at them, the car leaves without picking up all of its members, and quickly leaves. The cartel members are then seen running away to save their lives. However, as they ran in the same direction as the SUV, it's possible that the vehicle picked them up after getting out of the officer's view, possibly someplace safe where he couldn't hurt them. This is where the footage ends. This is not the first time cartel members have suddenly ambushed law enforcement officers. The ongoing cartel wars in Mexico have turned the officers into their #1 target. The cartel members don't leave a chance where they can attack and harm officers. In this video from 2017, Mexican law enforcement officers can be seen being ambushed by cartel members and firing round after round to save their lives. The attack took place in the border state of Chihuahua, where the cartel members found the officers patrolling and decided to attack them. Federal officials confirmed that the military was conducting surveillance tours to inhibit criminal acts when they were attacked by a group of armed men who were traveling in pickup trucks, dressed in camouflage clothes similar to those used by members of the armed forces, but on their arms carried labels that identified them as members of the CDN. In another video, we can see a cartel attack a patrol police team in Nuevo Laredo. In June 2010, unidentified gunmen attacked some officers near a vocational school in western Mexico. They were returning from patrol. The gunmen blocked the road with a bus and fired at the officers. The battle took out 10 of the attackers, but the officers didn't immediately release their names.
Authorities say the assailants used this bus to block the road. Several of the gunmen were killed, but authorities haven't given an exact figure. Police did not immediately identify the attackers or indicate if they are suspected of being gunmen for the La Familia cartel.
Earlier in April 2010, gunmen ambushed 2 police vehicles in an intersection in Ciudad Juarez in Chihuahua, taking the lives of 7 officers and a passerby. The reason for the attack remains unknown. The law enforcement agencies pretty much have their hands tied when it comes to cartels. In 2017, the Sinaloa cartel members turned the state of Culiacan into a war zone after law enforcement arrested Joaquin El Chapo Guzman's son, Ovidio Guzman.
Pase, por favor, pase, por favor. Vayan los tres, tranquilo, aquí señor. Fuera, tranquilo. Listo, anda aquí tomando. ¿Traes armas?
After many casualties, the officers were forced to release him on the same day.
Gunmen battled security forces in broad daylight, torching cars and leaving at least one gas station ablaze. Police forces were forced to retreat, and local reports say Guzman was freed.
Some states of Mexico are exceptionally dangerous for officers. The state of Zacatecas, for example, is a breeding ground for the cartel wars, and many officers have lost their lives in the process. In fact, the number might be the highest in the country. Most of these incidents have unfortunately happened when the officers have finished their shifts. The authorities require the officers to submit their firearms once they're done working for the day, as they fear misuse of the weapons by the officers. This leaves them unprotected and an easy target for the cartel members.
Officers told us that a war between the Sinaloa and the Jalisco New Generation cartels is causing havoc in the state. They're forced to either choose sides or to fight both. And they don't have the equipment to do that, even when they are on duty.
Despite pushing the officers into battle, the government don't equip them with the right weapons and protection. Their existing supplies are either worn out or they aren't efficient enough. This makes them vulnerable and more susceptible to attack.
The bulletproof vests are out of date. They were out of date by February 2020. Our helmets and vests have about 50-60% of the original resistance. With our vehicles, we're struggling with an infinity of mechanical problems.
It appears as if only prayers and good luck can save these officers from the deadly cartel ambushes. And this officer believes the same himself. He claims that they never get any concrete support from the higher-ups, which is why the gap persists.
Basically, the bosses don't speak to us. We don't even really know who the director is. A plan, a strategy, objectives. Right now, we don't have them.
However, the law enforcement top officials have different claims. They believe that they have the perfect coordination and their collective efforts have lowered the number of deaths.
We have a lot of coordination in these moments. Apart from the attacks on us, you can check the statistics. Murders have gone down a lot. What we have to do is lift up the values we have, those human values from the moment that we go out on the street. For when a small child who still trusts us says hello, an old lady says, "You know what? God bless you."
It goes beyond saying that the officers who are losing their lives on the streets are bound by their duties and aren't getting any support or protection to save their lives, as the government has decided to turn a blind eye to the matter. The current state of the country is far from comforting, and the cartel wars against the law enforcement officers are becoming worse every year. It almost seems as if there's no hope for these officers. But what should one do if they find themselves in the middle of a cartel attack? And how can law enforcement officers protect themselves in such a situation? John Correa, an evidence-based defensive trainer at Active Self-Protection, gave his opinion on self-defense after watching and analyzing the security footage we showed earlier. Correa provides a step-by-step analysis of the defensive combats used by the on-duty officers during robberies and other criminal events. He also lends his expertise on what could have been improved in such situations. Correa opens the analysis by urging everyone to learn basic first aid skills that can be useful in such situations. The first thing he notices is that the officers are quite relaxed before the attack. It's perfectly normal, as there were no visible threats. But paying a little more attention could have alerted them to the impending trouble.
So these guys are just backing out. It's a normal day. They don't really have any reason to see anything amiss, but paying attention makes a lot of sense because watch now again, these guys are showing up and the first inclination they really have is rifle bullets going through their front windshield. Now, recognize this, the bad guys always get to set the time and place of the attack. Paying attention can give you a little bit of notice. Maybe again, if they were really kind of seeing what's going on in the world, maybe if they backed their pickup into where they were getting lunch and whatever, they might have had some more opportunity.
Correa states that it's usually the bad guys who get the advantage, as they get to decide the time and place of their attack. So paying attention to the surroundings can really help. He also stresses that perhaps the officers could back up the vehicle in the parking space so that they could always have their eyes on the streets. That way, they could see if any threats were approaching them. He says that instead of stopping the vehicle, the officers should have kept going in reverse and gotten out of there.
At any rate, once the bad guy kicks things off, you gotta respond, and maybe would have been a better solution here to continue to hit that reverse and get out of there with the car.
But if the car is not functional anymore due to the attacks, or you can't drive it for some reason, Correa says you must get out immediately, as staying inside increases your chances of getting fired at. You're practically defenseless inside an immobile car.
But if the car is not functional or you can't use it, it is a coffin.
In the footage, the first officer gets out of the car and drops to the ground. Correa marks this as a great strategy and stresses that it can prevent injury, especially if the opponent has firearms in possession.
I do notice that the first officer bails and gets low. I think that is an excellent strategy. Somebody shooting in the cab of your car is to get as low as you can to get out of that car as fast as you can.
Correa also marks the difference between cover and concealment. Cover prevents bullets from hitting you. Concealment doesn't. So when you're fighting an armed individual, taking cover is important, as your opponent can fatally wound you by firing at you. In the video, both officers take cover where the cartel members can't fire at them anymore. One takes position behind the engine block, and the other hides behind another car, from where he can observe and attack his enemies.
Now here's where you need to know the difference between cover and concealment, because these guys are shooting rifle bullets at you, and recognize that you want to get behind something that'll stop bullets when dudes are shooting rifles at you. And what I notice here is that they both do a pretty good job of getting behind cover. They use the engine block here and the wheel wells to try to get where they can't get shot by these guys anymore.
He also praises the officers for being on the move and taking cover, even though they're badly wounded. He says that it's always a wise decision to keep moving to save your life. This is an emotional fitness component that all law enforcement officers must have. The audience and general public have much to learn from it. Later in the video, when the officer picks up his rifle and the cartel members run toward their SUV, the officer begins to fire at them. Correa notes that the distance here is great for using a rifle. A pistol, however, wouldn't be able to fire this accurately at this range. Correa also points out a mistake that one of the officers makes by standing in the open by the pickup truck as he fires at the cartel members. He is positioned in the open and his body is at risk of being hit.
I still might recommend, rather than kind of standing out, in the open like this, that he try to use the truck in some way. He might be able to brace against it, get better shots on target, use those kinds of things, have at least a little bit of concealment and those kinds of things.
However, he acknowledges that these things sometimes can be hard to notice or maintain when someone is under heavy fire.
Kind of hard to say when people are shooting rifles at you though, right?
On the opposite side of the road, the SUV fails to pick up the first attacker, and he is seen running away fully armed. The officer fires away at the retreating SUV. Correa here denotes that he should have targeted the armed cartel member instead of the vehicle, as he was the bigger threat here, and could have fired back at the officer.
Well, I get it that our officer's kind of focused and paying attention to the truck, but recognize where the actual threat is coming from is the guy with the rifle in his hand. So rather than putting more rounds on the truck, I would recommend to try to put some rounds on the guy that's got a rifle that has been shooting at you and your partner instead.
He adds that all of this analysis might not be possible at such a heated moment, and also might be impossible for the officer to see everything from their point of view. He ends the analysis by focusing on the fact that whomever fires their arms is responsible for it. This implies that anyone possessing a firearm must be responsible when engaging in an open firing in the middle of the road.
But make sure you remember you're responsible for every shot that leaves the muzzle of your rifle. I think these officers were put in a really bad spot. I think that they showed excellent emotional fitness. I hope they recover fully, and I hope they catch these bad guys who tried to murder them.
Cartel wars are spreading throughout Mexico, and their effects have crossed the border into the United States as well. If the authorities cannot contain them, the situation can soon become the next pandemic, turning Mexico into a war zone. Many law enforcement officers are risking their lives to fight these cartels. Many have already paid the ultimate price for it. The government is trying their best to ensure the officers' safety, but under such circumstances, no one really knows when the country will find peace. What are your thoughts on the cartel attacks on law enforcement officials? Do you think the Mexican government is taking the necessary steps to protect their officers? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching the video. Don't forget to like the video to show your support, subscribe to our channel, and press the bell for notifications of future uploads. See you soon with the next exciting story.